Longtime fans of the MCU have started to notice the diminishing quality of the content they've been putting out over the years, and more recently, we're starting to see it hit them in the Disney Plus platform with lack of viewership for their MCU shows, and also just people not attending their big budget movies, which have resulted in a series of flops for the studios. And now that's what gets us to this article from the Direct, talking to Nia DaCosta, who's the director of the upcoming The Marvels. Will Captain Marvel 3 happen? MCU director addresses future prospects. Now, scrolling down into the article, she kind of talks about just like what she kind of thinks of Phase 5 and what they should do moving forward, and more specifically, like what her future role in the MCU is going to be. And this is what she has to say. I'll pitch Kevin, that's Kevin Feige, 17 versions of what can happen with all these women and why and how and this and that. And he's like, okay, girl. And sometimes I think I've really got a movie going after this. And then other times I'm like, oh, they have this whole other plan and I'm not a part of. Yeah, that kind of makes sense. I mean, you never know. I mean, unless they, well, I'm not going to say unless they greenlight you, then to have another movie, because they can always pull the plug at any moment, even when it's in production. But usually I would think that's not the case. In terms of women-led films and women as superheroes in particular and excitement around that, I think it's really just about whether or not the movie's good. I agree with that completely. Especially now we have more and more films that are female-led, that are action-based and superhero-based. That is also true. There was a lot of female-led movies and action movies and things like that. So when they're trying to say like, oh, we need the representation, that's not really the case anymore. I mean, and I'm not saying you can just stop making those type of movies altogether, but I mean, I'm just saying that you don't necessarily need to force it in there at every turn, because there's plenty of variety out there, especially like she even says here in the superhero or action-based type genres. And she goes on to kind of talk about Barbie and the success that that made as a women-centric movie. Barbie is so specific. It's Barbie. Every girl in the world pretty much had a Barbie, and a lot of men. So I think that's a phenomenon that's probably going to make $1 billion. But I think for women-led superhero films, as long as the quality stays up, that's what's going to keep the audience coming back. And that is 100% true. It's really not about whether you push an agenda or anything like that, because that's one of the things that Marvel has leaned into post-Infinity Crisis movies that they've been making, because they were just kind of like left wondering what they're going to do. I mean, if you actually think about it, they were setting up the whole Infinity War saga pretty much from the get-go. I mean, yeah, Phase 1 was more or less setting up the team, and then Phase 2 onward was setting up Thanos and the Infinity Wars. But then after that, they kind of seem to not know what they're going to do with it. I mean, they're talking about the whole multiverse crisis and things like that. But I mean, everything they've been doing since then just kind of feels like they're throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. And it really does show. And as a result, there's really nothing of quality. I mean, they just kind of been pushing things, and they've been falling back on the old additive of like, oh, well, let's just add like various groups, LGBTQ, women, minority characters and things like that. So we can use those as a built-in shield in case people try to attack this movie or people have criticism of this movie. A lot of times, often it's valid criticism, but any criticism that people might have is just gets drowned out with like, oh, you're a sexist, ist, or phobe, or whatever kind of thing that they throw at the people. And that ultimately hurts them, because people are like, well, fine, I'm just not going to watch your movie then. And we've been seeing that happen time and time again. So, I mean, that's probably why you got statements like from Bob Iger recently saying that they're going to cut back on the Marvel content, because before, during the height of the MCU, which it kind of like was capped off with Endgame, you saw that there was a lot of other people going to the movies at that point. I mean, it was more or less a common thing, but that was also post or pre-lockdowns and things like that, where people just habitually went to theaters and watched whatever came out, including every Marvel movie. But since then, there's been so much content that has been coming out, it just kind of diluted everything. And I mean, even if people want to keep up with all of it, I mean, there's just so much, not to mention just all the shows and movies and things like that from Disney Plus. And they're trying to make it seem like, oh, well, you have to watch everything, because they want people to watch all their content. But I mean, people are feeling like, well, I'm just too overwhelmed. There's just too much coming at me right now. And I guess that's what they call superhero fatigue. But I still say it's lazy and bad movie fatigue, because when you're trying to put out so much so quickly, you're not going to quality control all of it, as opposed to if you're just putting out like a couple movies a year. So, I mean, if they do take a step backwards and just maybe like make sure everything is good before they push it out, then then it probably will succeed. And at that end, I mean, will the Marvels get a sequel? I mean, like she even said during the interview, it really depends on how good the movie is, but by all indicators, it's probably not going to do too well. I mean, this, despite the fact that Captain Marvel made over $1 billion worldwide. I mean, keep in mind, this was sandwiched right between Infinity War and Endgame. I mean, in the end credit scene of Infinity War literally referenced her. So people were kind of watching it thinking that it was required viewing sort of thing. And like I said, this was also the height of the Marvel cinematic universe. So I don't think we're going to get a repeat of this one. I mean, Captain or the Marvels themselves is probably going to be another flop for them. And then is there going to be a Marvels 2, or probably not, at least most likely not, but who knows what's going to happen with it. I mean, but it does seem like Disney is trying to reflect and kind of get back on course and be how they used to be, which means to reduce the amount of content that they're putting out and making sure everything is of quality. But let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. And if you like this video, make sure you click that like button, share the video, and subscribe to the channel if you want to stay up to date with the latest news. Thank you.